What kind of intriguing tale have you got for us today?
You know, I just finished reading this book. It's called The Jolly Rogers Social Club by Nick Foster. And I'm telling you, it is a wild ride.
Okay.
This guy, William Holbert, was living the dream down in Panama. This bar called, you ready for this? The Jolly Rogers Social Club.
Okay.
So Jolly Rogers, skull and crossbones.
Gotcha. Sounds idyllic so far.
Right. Paradise.
But I have a feeling there's got to be a catch here. What
Yeah.
gives?
Wild Bill, as he liked to call himself, was a con artist. And even more chillingly, a serial killer. The book is so gripping, I hear they're even talking about making a TV series about this whole thing.
It makes you wonder what draws people to a place like Panama in the first place, right? And what kind of person could orchestrate these kinds of things in what's supposed to be paradise?
Exactly. And that is exactly what we're going to unpack today. Why Bocas del Toro specifically? What are these things called bearer shares? And how do they play into all of this? And of course, who were the victims of Wild Bill?
The name bearer shares rings a bell.
Yeah.
But I'm a little fuzzy on the specifics. It's something about anonymity and the potential for, I don't know, mischief.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So imagine like a stock certificate, but the owner's name is just left blank. So whoever is holding it, boom, they're the owner.
Sounds risky.
Risky.
Yeah.
It's super risky.
Yeah.
But before we get to Wild Bill and his dark dealings, let's talk about Panama. What's the allure for expats? Why are so many Americans packing up and heading south?
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely see the appeal, right? The beautiful weather, the beaches. It's kind of that escape from the rat race vibe. But I suspect there's more to it than just, sunshine and margaritas. What did you find out?
Before we get into all that crazy stuff, I want to hear from you guys, the listener. What do you know about Panama, Bocas del Toro, maybe? Or, just expat life in general? Bearer shares. Any thoughts?
Definitely want to hear what people have to say about that.
Drop all your thoughts in the comments below. Sharing is caring, right?
Right.
It's not all about the scenery. Panama has a surprisingly modern infrastructure,
Okay.
really reliable healthcare, and a whole bunch of benefits for retirees, like this thing called the pensionado visa.
Okay. Now you're talking some tangible perks beyond just the aesthetics.
Right.
It sounds like Panama is really going after retirees and expats. What about the financial side of things? Are there any tax advantages?
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Panama has this thing called territorial taxation. So they only tax income that you earn inside Panama. So if you're working online or you have investments back home, that's all tax-free.
Wow.
And they have this whole menu of different visas to appeal to everybody from entrepreneurs to investors.
Oh, that's fascinating. It seems like Panama is positioning itself to be a kind of global hub, attracting foreign investment talent, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
How does that compare to other popular expat destinations? I've always kind of thought of that as more of a haven for eco-conscious expats.
Right.
Does Panama have a similar vibe?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But it does seem like Panama is much more focused on attracting foreign investment and development, whereas Costa Rica is maybe more focused on ecotourism and conservation. So I guess you could say it's like choosing between two different flavors of paradise.
Oh, I like that. Two sides of the same coin, perhaps. Yeah. But let's zero in on the setting for our main story here. Bocas del Toro.
Okay.
Paint us a picture. What is this archipelago like? Is it really all it's cracked up to be?
Okay, so picture this. You've got these white sand beaches, crystal clear turquoise water, lush rainforests, teeming with wildlife. It's the kind of place you see on a postcard.
Sounds idyllic.
Right. It's the escape to paradise.
But I imagine even paradise has its shadows, right? What's lurking beneath the surface?
Well, for one thing, the cost of living in Bocas del Toro is way higher than on the mainland.
Okay.
And to get around, you have to rely on water taxis, which can really add up.
Yeah.
And then there's this thing that everybody talks about. It's called the gringo tax. So tourists often find themselves paying inflated prices for just about everything.
Ah, the joys of being a foreigner.
I know.
I'm curious about the social dynamics. What's the expat community like there? Is it a close-knit group or is it a little more transient?
It sounds like it's a real mix. You've got people who are genuinely seeking out a new life.
Right.
And, embracing the Panamanian culture. Sure. But then you've got this other element. These are people who are maybe running from something or looking to disappear, maybe even reinvent themselves.
That makes sense. It's like a microcosm of the whole human experience is playing out against this backdrop of paradise.
Yeah. And, that mix can create some tension.
Sure.
A clash between those who are seeking escape and those who are seeking belonging. And that brings us back to William Holbert and the dark side of this tropical haven.
Okay.
So to understand how he pulled off these crimes, we need to talk about those bearer shares.
All right, let's unpack that. Remind me what makes them so risky, and how do they tie into Holbert's story?
Well, it all comes down to anonymity.
Yeah.
With bearer shares, there's no record of ownership.
Okay.
Which makes them perfect for money laundering, tax evasion, all kinds of shady dealing. And Holbert, being the savvy con artist, he exploited this to the fullest.
So he was using them to kind of hide his ill-gotten gains.
Exactly. It's a fascinating example of how this obscure financial instrument can have global repercussions.
Absolutely. It highlights that whole complex interplay between, the financial system's international regulations and the human capacity for, innovation, but also exploitation.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. But let's bring it back to the man at the center of this whole thing, William Holbert. What kind of person was he? What drove him to commit these horrific acts?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's hard to fathom how someone living in paradise could harbor such darkness inside them. What did you find out from the book?
Well, it's clear that Holbert was a master manipulator.
Okay.
Very charming, charismatic, a natural storyteller. He could spin these elaborate tales and weave in just enough truth to make them believable.
Classic con artist behavior.
Yeah.
It's amazing how they create these intricate webs of deception, preying on people's inherent desire to trust and believe.
Exactly. And behind that charming facade was this deeply disturbed individual.
Yeah.
His early life is a bit of a mystery, but there are hints of petty crimes, a tendency to exaggerate, even fabricate stories about himself. For instance, he claimed to have been class president in high school, but nobody even remembers him from those days.
Oh, wow. That's a telling detail. It suggests this real deep-seated need for validation, maybe a desire to rewrite his own narrative.
Right.
A disregard for the truth.
Yeah. And it seems like his life took a dark turn after a really bitter divorce and losing custody of his children. He felt wronged, cheated by the system. And it's like he was carrying all this baggage when he landed in Panama, looking for a fresh start.
It's a familiar pattern. Sometimes paradise becomes this refuge for those seeking to escape their past, but those inner demons often follow. So how did he go from disgruntled expat to cold-blooded killer? What was his MO?
It was all about gaining trust. He'd befriend these wealthy expats, often people who are looking to buy property or invest in Bocas del Toro.
Right.
He would entertain them at his bar, the Jolly Roger Social Club, spin these tales of adventure and opportunity, and slowly draw them into his web.
I can picture it now. The charismatic bar owner with that skull and crossbones flag, regaling his guests with these stories. It's almost like he was selling them a dream, this fantasy that kind of masked his true intentions.
You hit the nail on the head. He was selling them a dream, but a deadly one. Once he gained their trust and learned about their assets, he would strike. He'd lure them to his property under false pretenses, and then, he'd eliminate the problem.
What kind of person can compartmentalize like that? Befriend someone and then so cold-bloodedly take their life?
I know. That's a question that keeps coming back to me. And from what I've read, Holbert doesn't seem to show any remorse. In fact, he claimed to have killed his friend, Cher Hughes, to show himself, I'm a cold-hearted bastard.
Wow. It sends chills down my spine. It's almost like he was trying to convince himself of his own ruthlessness.
Yeah.
But did he ever give an explanation as to why he targeted those individuals?
His explanations were often contradictory and really self-serving. He claimed that some of them were involved in illegal activities, but there's no evidence to support those claims. So it seems more likely that he was just motivated by greed, using elaborate justifications to mask his true intentions.
It's a tactic we see so often with manipulators and abusers to dehumanize their victims, to shift the blame and make their actions seem less horrific.
Yeah.
And sadly, it often works.
Yeah, it does. And it makes it even harder for the victims' families to find closure because the person who took their loved ones is still trying to control the narrative even from behind bars.
It's a tragedy on so many levels, but I think it's so important to remember that behind every statistic, every headline, there's a human story.
Yeah.
A life cut short, a family left devastated.
Absolutely.
So tell me about the victims. Who were they and what brought them to cross paths with Holbert?
One of the most heartbreaking cases involves this couple, Michael and Nan Brown. They moved to Panama looking for a peaceful retirement.
Yeah.
They had this property in Bocas del Toro. They called it Darklands.
Darklands. That's kind of a chillingly ironic name considering what happened there.
It is, isn't it?
Okay.
And tragically, that name became all too real. Michael's son from a previous marriage. 17-year-old Watson was visiting them at the time. He was this bright, artistic kid, loved nature, and was super excited to experience life in Panama.
It's just unimaginable. A family vacation turning into a nightmare makes you question the whole idea of paradise.
It really does. And Holbert, using the alias Bill Cortez, befriended the Browns. He even expressed interest in buying their property.
Oh, wow.
Shared meals with them, gained their trust. And then in this moment of just unimaginable cruelty, he took their lives. All of them, including young Watson.
It's hard to even fathom the level of depravity it takes to wipe out an entire family like that. Did he offer any explanation as to why he targeted them?
He claimed that the Browns were involved in human trafficking, doing some real bad shit, is how he put it.
Oh my God.
But there's absolutely no evidence to support that.
It's such a classic tactic of manipulators, to dehumanize their victims, to create this narrative that justifies their actions. Did anyone believe him?
Disturbingly, yes, Holbert has actually gained a following online. People who buy into his lies and see him as some kind of anti-establishment hero.
That's just chilling. It's a chilling example of how charisma and this really twisted sense of justice can completely overshadow the reality of murder. And it makes it that much harder for the families to find any kind of closure.
Absolutely. They're left to grieve while the person who shattered their lives continues to manipulate and control the narrative, even from behind bars. And sadly, the Browns weren't Holbert's only victims.
Tell me about some of the others whose lives he took. Were there any common threads?
Another tragic case is that of Bo Eisler. He went by Bo Yancey. He was this retired art and antiques dealer. This really charming, well-traveled guy who had settled in Bocas del Toro looking for a quiet life.
Right.
He had a property he wanted to sell, and guess who showed interest?
Holbert. Sounds like owning property in Bocas del Toro was a dangerous proposition.
It certainly was. Bo vanished in November of 2009, leaving behind all these unanswered questions.
Wow.
His friends and family, they feared the worst. But it wasn't until Holbert was finally captured that the truth came out. He had been murdered and buried on Holbert's property.
Oh, it's mind-boggling that he could operate like this for so long, maintaining this facade of normalcy while committing such horrific acts. How did he manage to evade suspicion for so long?
Well, Bocas del Toro, with its transient population and this really laid-back atmosphere, probably played a part.
Okay.
People come and go. Sometimes they disappear without a trace. It's almost like a place where you can reinvent yourself or even vanish altogether without raising too many eyebrows.
It's the dark side of paradise, isn't it? A place where secrets can thrive. It seems like Holbert was deliberately targeting people who are maybe a little isolated people who wouldn't be missed right away.
Exactly. But eventually, his web of deceit unraveled and the bodies literally started surfacing.
Like a real-life horror movie. But beyond the shock and horror, there's this question that keeps coming back to me. Could any of this have been prevented? Were there warning signs that people missed?
That's a tough one. Holbert was such a master manipulator, skilled at disarming people, gaining their trust.
Yeah.
But looking back, there were definitely some red flags. His tendency to exaggerate shady business dealings. His need to control every narrative.
It's a reminder that evil often wears a mask of charm. We need to be discerning, look beyond the surface and pay attention to those red flags, even when we'd rather ignore them.
Absolutely. And it's especially crucial in places like Bocas del Toro, where the allure of paradise can sometimes blind us to the potential dangers.
We've talked about the victims, Holbert's methods, even the role of those bearer shares, but what about the woman who was by his side?
Right.
Laura Reese. What role did she play in all of this?
That's a question that's still kind of shrouded in mystery.
Yeah.
While Holbert confessed to the murders, Reese has always maintained her innocence. She claims she had no idea about any of it.
It's hard to believe that she was completely oblivious, especially given the number of victims and the elaborate cover-ups involved. I mean, they were living together, running a bar together. They even fled together when the authorities closed in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But proving her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt is another matter.
Right.
There was some circumstantial evidence. Her fingerprints were found on some of the victims' belongings. Witnesses claim to have seen her acting suspiciously.
So it's like a classic true crime puzzle.
Yeah.
Conflicting accounts, missing pieces, and this lingering sense of unease. Did Holbert ever implicate her?
He did initially. He actually claimed that Reese was the mastermind.
Oh, wow.
That she planned the murders and forced him to carry them out.
Oh, my gosh.
But later on, he changed his story and said that they were both equally culpable.
It's a dizzying game of he said, she said.
It really is.
In the end, was she convicted, along with Holbert?
She was. They were both found guilty of murder and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. 47 years for Holbert and 26 years for Reese.
Sounds like justice was served, at least to some extent. But the victims' families are never going to have all the answers, are they?
No.
Yeah.
Sadly, no. And the fact that Holbert continues to manipulate the narrative from prison only adds to their pain.
It just shows that the impact of these kinds of violent crimes extends so far beyond the immediate victims, this trail of shattered lives and unanswered questions. But there's another layer to this story that I find really disturbing. You mentioned earlier that Holbert has actually gained a following online.
Right.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. It's really bizarre and unsettling. Despite these horrific crimes he's committed, Holbert has somehow managed to create an image for himself as like this rogue anti-hero, even like a celebrity.
Wow.
He gives interviews from prison posts on social media, boasts about controlling the prison system.
It's unbelievable. You would think a convicted serial killer would be kept under wraps.
Right.
But instead, he's given a platform to further manipulate and control his narrative.
It seems like there's this morbid fascination with him, this dark side of human nature that's just drawn to the macabre and the taboo.
It raises a lot of questions about our society's obsession with true crime and this allure of the bad boy persona.
It really does. But amidst all this darkness and intrigue, I think it's so crucial to remember the real victims of this story.
Absolutely. Those whose lives were cut short, their families left grappling with this unimaginable loss. Their stories deserve to be heard, their memories honored.
And as we delve deeper into this case, we can't forget about Cher Hughes,
Right.
Holbert's close friend and confidant, who also became one of his victims.
Right.
Her story, like those of the others, is a reminder of just how fragile trust can be and the devastating consequences of misplaced faith. It's hard to grasp the betrayal that she must have felt.
Yeah.
She's a successful businesswoman from St. Louis, drawn to Bocas del Toro for a fresh start. Everybody described her as just having this infectious energy, a real zest for life.
It makes her story even more tragic. She came to paradise seeking something better and just happened to cross paths with someone who would take advantage of that.
Yeah. She met Holbert soon after she arrived, and they became really close friends. He was like a chameleon, reflecting back what people wanted to see and share with her, open heart. She probably just saw the best in him.
Right.
The potential for good.
It's a reminder that con artists are really good at reading people, finding those vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
They prey on those who are trusting and those who see the good in others.
Right. And, in Bocas del Toro, with its transient population and laid-back atmosphere, those red flags might have been easier to dismiss.
It's like the allure of paradise creates this veil, this sense of security that can make people more susceptible to manipulation.
Exactly. There were whispers about Holbert's shady dealings, but they were often overshadowed by his charm and the promise of a better life.
It's a powerful combination, charm and a shared dream. It can be hard to resist, especially when you're looking for a fresh start.
And tragically for Cher, that trust proved fatal. Holbert lured her to his property, claiming he needed help with some paperwork, and then he shot her just like the others.
It's a chilling reminder that evil often hides in plain sight wearing that mask of normalcy. And it reinforces the importance of vigilance, trusting our gut instincts when something feels off.
Absolutely. We can't just rely on appearances or someone's carefully crafted persona. We need to be willing to, question, dig deeper, protect ourselves and the people we care about.
Yeah. This whole case, with all its twists and turns, this exploration of paradise and its dark underbelly, it really feels like a cautionary tale.
It does. It's a reminder that even in the most beautiful places, darkness can lurk beneath the surface, and that we all have a responsibility to be aware, to be informed, and to take steps to protect ourselves and the ones we love.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from Panama's allure for expats to the intricacies of bearer shares and the chilling story of William Holbert. But for me, what really sticks out are the victims. Their stories remind us of the human cost of these crimes, the ripple effects of violence that extend far beyond the immediate victims.
You're absolutely right. We can't lose sight of the human element. The lives that were tragically cut short, the families left to deal with unimaginable loss.
It's a sobering reminder that even in paradise, evil can exist. But it's also a call to action, a reminder that we can't be complacent. We need to be vigilant, discerning, and willing to challenge those who exploit trust and prey on the vulnerable.
Well said.
Yeah.
And to our listeners out there, we encourage you to explore the source material further. We'll have links to the book The Jolly Rogers Social Club, as well as articles about William Holbert and his victims on our website.
And be sure to check out our social media channels for more deep dives and thought-provoking content.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and as always, stay safe.